fight over it, though. You know, and that's obviously very, very important this time of year, especially.
I've never seen this woman's commentary.
It's honestly, it's fantastic.
It really is.
So the two co-editors of it, one of which was one of my professors in
Oh,
school, and the other was one of Blue's professors in LA. Both of them are very, very highly respected, and a number of my teachers are, the people who offer commentary in there. And, it's like a very profound thing when you think about this. And I tried to explain it to people, who are, they see this and they say, well, what does that mean? The other one's the men's, and obviously missing the point entirely. But I try to explain to them, I think, like, if you go back 2,000 years, let's just say 2,000 years of commenting on the Torah, right? It's longer than that, but let's start with that as a number. And in those 2,000 years, there was not a single woman who has a book of commentary until the 20th century, right? Like, it's almost baffling. And you think about how much wisdom was lost to the centuries for people who
well,
weren't taught, and even the ones who were taught, right? There are plenty of occasions in which there was in history, a rabbi who teaches their daughter, right, and all that. But even with their knowledge in the culture and in the society, they're not allowed to do anything,
that's right.
right? So, and you think about what wisdom could have been unearthed in that time if we were operating with 100% of our population instead of 50% of our population, which also, tends to think in one very particular kind of way. So the idea that this is really the first fully, like this version of a Chumash, where the commentary is the first time in which all of the commentary itself are by women from various backgrounds, some rabbis, some professors, some just writers and poets, and then it has like a couple of things about it that I like that are just smart. Like they put an outline at the beginning of each parsha. So if you go, like for example, this week's was very helpful to have, but
And it's a lot of English.
it's a ton of English, and most of the stuff that's in here is really very smart, very thoughtfully done stuff. And yes, sometimes it does obviously focus on women in the story and narratives and things like that. But you see, so for the entire parsha, it breaks it down. So one of my assignments when I was in school was to do exactly that for this professor. And you think, how hard could that be, right? You sit down, you write a couple of lines, you break down it was one of the hardest assignments that I had because she wouldn't accept BS. You had to be able to justify why you broke it up in a certain kind of way.
That's good.
It was really great. It was really a great exercise in, working with text, because Torah is very rarely that convenient where, a sentence ends and another one begins and there's clarity between them and there's a reason why, So it's really great. And to be honest with you, I'm not knowledgeable enough about poetry. So there's some poetry in there that I like and some that I don't. But it's just a nice idea that they include that, along with other things. And then on every page, there's individual commentary. So like if you look at at a verse, if you go down here, it will tell you, here's an explanation of some stuff in that verse. But at the beginning and the end of each section, there's also an essay, like something that somebody wrote that gives you a kind of frame for the whole thing. So it, as soon as it came out, it really was to me, it was a big important moment in the history of the Jewish people.
But it's back to front, but.
Yeah. Yeah, layout gets a little confusing.
Very, because you're reading.
Yeah,
like
I have that, I struggle with that, and that's true actually of the other one also. I think what happens is like once you use it enough, then your mind automatically kind of figures it out, but it's not intuitive at all. It's actually very confusing. So, in that way, it is definitely tricky. Right. Can I get you anything? You want a cup of water or something?
Oh, no, thank
You sure? All right, I'm just gonna
Oh, good.
You know, so we're not entirely alone, which is good.
Every single piece of stuff I have at home,
Yeah.
everything doesn't work. Cell phone, I have the tablet with me.
You have the tablet with you?
It's in Bart's car. I'm gonna get somebody to, well, after the kids will come for the
Uh-huh.
holiday, we'll see what they can do.
What kind of tab, is it an Apple one, or is it an iPad, or it's the other kind? You have no idea?
I take it to
Sorry.
the library.
Sure.
And they put
Books on it, yeah, yeah, yeah.
You try to get the books. So I was watching a movie, I think, I don't know what it was.
Sure.
I got this much on the top of the page, can't get it to go.
Oh.
Not for me, it's not my generation.
No, I understand, I completely understand that, that's,
I am the worst. Where was it?
no, you're not the, look, don't make this
What's
about
the
you.
Fagans? Are they all right, or?
Yeah, no, actually, it was, I ran into them at Harborfest just a few minutes ago, or when we were in town, so they, this was Neil and Andrea's grandson, I think, got married in Montauk, so they were out there.
Redheaded kid?
No, not Ike.
They don't talk to their son.
Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure I remember exactly, you know, because it was like in passing conversation, but I know they got married in Montauk, and they showed me the pictures, and it looks really wonderful. But it was a Friday night wedding, so they were there and not here.
Friday night wedding?
Yeah, no, believe it or not, I've done a few Friday afternoon weddings, you know, like right before, you know, Shabbat and
That's
stuff.
different, but I know
Yeah.
Jewish kids getting married
Yeah, no, I mean, the truth is that,
Saturday afternoon.
no, I look, most of the weddings that I do are absolutely, you know, Saturday before sundown. Especially because, you know, when people get married out here, you know, but if you waited until sundown in June or July, you know,
But
it's.
you are very, very.
Well, I know, but I didn't start that way, actually.
But you answered me when I asked you,
Yeah.
which one of the best things you said. I said you would marry Mickey Mouse to Daisy Duck, and you said, yeah, I stand a 50-50 chance of having them have a Jewish home.
Yeah, and in all honesty, you know, that usually is my mindset. And look, you know, out of at this point, probably getting closer to 100 weddings that I've done over the years, you know, a couple of them maybe I misjudged and may not result in the outcome that, you know, I would hope for. But the vast majority, I think, actually, it's exactly what I envisioned is what actually happens, right? Is that you have a really committed family and a relationship and all that, which is good.
My friends, the Florins, remember?
Oh, yeah, no, of course.
They have another one coming up. 2 Jewish kids, well, they're not kids, 2 Jewish people. She wants her brother-in-law, who's a Turk or something. Kills me.
You mean to officiate? Yeah, not so uncommon either, you know.
It's, no,
that's-
the boy's family, the man's family. So, what I hear is his grandfather was the only Jew to ever win in Wimbledon.
No kidding. That's a big deal.
I know the grandmother was out here, but they were talking, everybody's got a hookness, they say. So anyway, she said, oh, they might bring a rabbi. Good.
Okay, so
This is what I'll do.
this is what we're gonna need, and
Okay.
you have the advantage over those that are watching at home because you have it in front of you. I don't, I didn't make copies for the internet, so
Okay.
they're gonna have to suffer
I
loss.
don't hear.
You don't hear?
I don't hear, no.
Ah,
The hearing aids, I can't, they don't work either.
they don't work either.
Too-
Yeah, too technical now. All right, well, I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, me too.
So, you know, it's almost the end of Shabbat, so I can't say quite Shabbat Shalom, but almost Shavuot Tov. So we're actually, for those that are watching at home, we'll welcome you. It's just me and Mimi. I don't want to give any false illusions. We could tell them the room is full of 100 people, but you know what? The beauty of this moment is that it is actually a very self-reflective service. And it's not a terribly long one, so I thought what I would do is first just teach a little bit of background, and then a little bit of text, and I want to teach actually a new prayer, and then we'll do the service of Slichot, which, as I said, unfortunately for those that are watching at home, you won't be able to do too much, but if you wanted to follow along, you could probably go to Sefaria and go to one of in the liturgy section, find a Siddur, and look for Slichot. It's a little advanced, but you know, you could certainly give it a shot. But what is the service of Slichot, right? The first question that most of us, I think, have some concept of what it is, but I want to give at least a little bit of its sort of historical background.
So the word lisloach and the word slicha in Hebrew is forgiveness, right? To ask forgiveness. So you bump into somebody in Hebrew, you would say slicha. Okay, so it can mean something as simple as that, right? An accidental glance, whatever it is, right? You can use it as a word of apology. But slichot refers to both the service that we're talking about right now and the prayers that are its primary makeup. So it is both slichot with a capital S and slichot with a smaller lowercase s. So in other words, right, every service of slichot is focused on prayers that are, again, focused on the idea of seeking and asking for forgiveness. And historically, again, is something that is in the month of Elul leading into the high holidays. But like a lot of things in Judaism, slichot as a service, right? You don't find it in the Torah per se, although we'll get to that. So it's something that is created by the rabbis over successive generations, and especially in the time periods in which the Jews are living really in diaspora and spread out all over the world and have now developed into certain, what we call rites, R-I-T-E. So Ashkenazi and Sephardi are the ones that we tend to be the most familiar with. Mizrahi Jews, Italian Jews, big Baghdadi Jews who actually live in India, right? Each of these communities has a different way of approaching both the slichot services, when they happen, what constitutes that service, when during the actual day they take place, how many of them, and so on. So it's wonderfully complex in that sense. And if you have the energy for it, I always tell people the nice thing about these days is that more often than not, they are streamed. So you could even watch many more traditional services because it's after Shabbat is over. And oftentimes, right, you might see a recording of it or a streaming of it. So if you're interested in this, you can really go on a deep dive on YouTube. You can watch all manner of recordings of Ashkenazi and Sephardi and the sort of different ways that they do things in the Mizrahi. But principally, the Sephardim actually, they do more slichot than the Ashkenazim do. It becomes actually an everyday practice during the month of Elul, in particular in the morning. So the only exceptions to that, if I'm not mistaken, I think are on Shabbat, and we'll get to why that is in a second. Ashkenazim begin normally at least 4 days out. So what happens under most circumstances is this service in most years would actually not be until next week. It would be the Shabbat right before Rosh Hashanah begins. And this actually tripped me up, I think, either in my second or my third year here where I was still a young rabbi and I didn't realize what was going on. And to make a long story short, the rabbis basically determine, Ashkenazi rabbis determine that in a year where Rosh Hashanah falls on a Monday or a Tuesday, which is not infrequent, if you were to do it the immediate Shabbat prior, right, Saturday evening, you would only have, right, if we did it, for example, next week, right, we would only have really Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then Monday night is when the holiday begins. So they argue that you actually need at least 4 days between Slichot and the start of Rosh Hashanah. And there are lots of different explanations for it, but the main one that, at least that I've come across over the years, is that when an offering was to be made at the temple, in particular a animal offering as a sacrifice, it was required 4 days of inspection before they were allowed to be offered. And that's partially because, right, the laws as relates to sacrifices were very strict. And if a animal had a blemish of some kind or the other, and it was offered up, right, it's not good generally. So while we obviously do not offer sacrifices anymore, the prevailing logic of the rabbis is that in place of the animal sacrifices, we offer our prayers. So the same principle kind of applies if we were to just run right into Rosh Hashanah without giving ourselves ample time to really think about what are we focusing on this high holidays? What does Slicha mean to us? What are we asking forgiveness of, et cetera, that we would basically be running into a situation that we're not really ultimately prepared for. So in this given year, we actually have more time to do more Slichot. Should you decide to do it, you can do it really every day. As I said, in terms of the Sephardic practice, that is in fact exactly what they do, and they really do it for the entire month of Elul. One other distinction, as I said, is that the Slichot for the Sephardim, if I understand it correctly, are primarily in the morning. Ashkenazi practice is actually to begin them, I believe it's like from midnight on, like from midnight until the sun comes up. So one of the reasons why in traditional environments Slichot becomes something of of an event beyond anything else is that, in Orthodox communities, you'll oftentimes see little kids who normally would not be allowed to stay up, right, are able to stay up, and they come to the service, and it's a big thing. And as I said, what happened over time is that, especially in communities that have a chazan, have a real, beautiful singing cantor, they really became, forgive me for using the word, but almost concert-like. That it really was, that kind of thing that people look forward to. So all over the Jewish world tonight, over the Ashkenazi Jewish world tonight, as soon as midnight hits in most of these places, it will become a huge event, and oftentimes sort of a choir, absolutely, right. Choir is very common, and that's why I would suggest actually going on YouTube and hearing some of this, because it really is quite beautiful.
Yeah.
So in any case, the Slichot service as a whole, as I said, is made up of specific prayers that are Slichot prayers. They are predominantly what are called piyutim, which are liturgical poems, one of which we're more immediately familiar with on Friday nights, which is, if you were to guess in the Kabbalat Shabbat, which one would be considered a piyut, is Lecha Dodi, right? Because the rest of Kabbalat Shabbat primarily is Psalms, right? Pre-existing Psalms. Lecha Dodi is composed, I think, in the 16th century. Yeah, and what happens with piyutim is that it's sort of, I know it's hard to imagine a world, before the Beatles, before rock music, before popular music in that kind of way, and even before Mozart and Bach and everything. This was in essence, right, the popular music of the time, right? So the greatest poets, the greatest liturgical poets, the greatest musicians, would compose these works, and oftentimes they would become, particular styles of poetry. One very, very, very famous kind, of which we're going to study in a second, is what's called an acrostic. So I don't know, maybe if you ever came across those in school, but an acrostic is basically where you take the letters of the alphabet, and each verse or each word in a verse is each letter in succession, right? So in Hebrew, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. So if you, and again, I apologize for those that are watching at home, but maybe if you take the sheet out that looks like this, and it says on the very top, this is one of the most famous of the Slichot melodies, which is called Adon HaSlichot. So it begins, Adon HaSlichot, right? Aleph, Bochen Levavot, Bet, Gole Amukot, Gimel, Dover Tzedakot, Dalet. And it continues that way. And then it has also what is very common for piyutim, which is a refrain. So the person that is leading will do the verses, and then there'll be a refrain, a one-liner that everybody in the congregation will learn and will do in a responsive fashion. So it's both, I think, beautiful. It works out beautifully in most cases. Maybe I'm not going to put so much expectation on you that you're going to be the choir tonight. It's fine, right? But that idea of sort of a call and response, that it's not just the person leading the service that matters, it's really about actually trying to get everybody involved, and that's a really lovely thing. The other really key component, both in the text of the liturgy itself of the service and thematically as part of the Slichot service, are what's called the Shalosh Esrei Midot, the 13 attributes of God, which again may be not so familiar, but if we look, it's a little complicated on the other side of the page maybe, but I took out a section, very famous section from the Talmud, from Masechet Rosh Hashanah, which, as you can imagine, primarily deals with the holiday and its observance and everything. It's very small print and all, that's all. I'm going to paraphrase it for the most part. But there is this famous line in the Torah that comes in the story immediately after the golden calf. So to remind us a little bit about the Torah chronology, basically Moses, everybody is there for the giving of the Ten Commandments, and then Moses goes up onto the mountain to commune with God, to receive, right, the full law, as it were. And while he's gone, the people begin to freak out because they haven't seen Moses come back. They think that God has abandoned them. They turn to Aaron. Aaron creates this golden calf, which they then begin to worship. And then Moshe comes down the mountain, sees this terrible thing taking place, and more than drops them, right? He throws the tablets down in anger. And it's in this moment in which basically Moshe falls on his face and realizes if he doesn't do something, everybody are goners. And he basically beseeches God to forgive everyone. And so it becomes this very famous piece that we sing throughout especially Yom Kippur. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum Bechanun, Erech, Apayim, V'Rav Chesed, V'Emet. Right, these 13 attributes that are sung are about God's various forms of mercy and compassion and understanding. Right, it's basically Moshe pleading to God to use those aspects of God's godliness rather than the judgmental, harsher things that most likely are to come. And what the tradition tells us is, okay, in verse 34 of Exodus, this is the second reading down from the top, Mimi, right, from Masechet Rosh Hashanah, it says, the verse states, and Adonai passed before him and proclaimed. You're going to hear me sing this in a little bit. Vaya'avor Adonai al panav vayikra, as an introductory line to what comes next, Adonai, Adonai. So here, right, Rabbi Yochanan says, were it not explicitly written in the verse, it would be impossible to say this, as it would be insulting to God's honor. What is he pointing out? Anytime that God is anthropomorphized, right, the idea that God can pass before Moses suggests that God has a corporeal body of some sort, which is generally a big no-no in Judaism. And he says, right, if not for this verse, and if not for its purpose, right, it would be insulting. So why is the verse there? It teaches that the Holy One, blessed be he, in that moment, wrapped himself in a prayer shawl, like a prayer leader, and showed Moses the structure of the order of the prayer. And he said to him, this is God says to Moshe, whenever the Jewish people sin, let them act before me in accordance with this order. Let the prayer leader wrap himself in a prayer shawl and publicly recite the 13 attributes of mercy, and I will forgive them. Okay? So just to be very clear, that whole explanation is midrash. It's not in the text of the Torah itself. But in essence, what we learn from this and what the rabbis used later generations is God is the first prayer leader, right? God basically tells Moshe how to daven. Because remember, again, what we consider prayer would have made no sense to our ancestors. The only form of prayer and worship that they understood really was sacrifice, right? What happened in the temple that was done by the Kohen and the Kohen Agadol and everybody else, right? The idea of there being a prayer leader and there being an order of service and all this other stuff, right? The rabbis use this and they sort of expound upon it, but it all begins in the moment in which things are about to break in an irreparable way. And the only solution to that potential outcome is to wrap oneself in a prayer shawl and to lead the service of, in essence, Slichot, right? To lead a service in which the people are asking for forgiveness. And it ends, right? Adonai, Adonai, this introduction by Avor Adonai al panav vayikra. The next line is Adonai, Adonai al rachum v'chanun, as I said. And the commentary says, right, why does it say Adonai, Adonai? Why does it repeat Adonai 2 times in a row? It's very unusual. Okay, and it should be understood as follows, says the Gemara, I am he, I am God before a person sins, and I am God after a person sins and performs repentance, as God does not recall from him his first sins, since he is always God, merciful and gracious. So, in other words, this is meant to be like the most reassuring kind of prayer that we have, to remind ourselves, to remind each other that even though we are obviously, right, faulted for our behavior, I mean, not a single human being, not a single Jewish person has, lived the last calendar year without making mistakes, without doing things, sometimes even really bad things, right? And so it's very important for the Jewish people historically to have a service, or have services, I should say, that remind us over and over and over again that God is compassionate. And while there is a part of me, like everybody else, that gets to Ne'ilah and Yom Kippur and says, I can't do this one more time. You do the 13 attributes repeatedly throughout Yom Kippur, you're going to see it happen. And I think every service other than Yizkor, it appears, after a while you start to say, like, why am I saying this over and over and over again? And I think to some degree the best comparison I can give is like, when a child knows they've done something wrong and they're inconsolable, right? And you have to just keep saying to them, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You made a mistake. I understand that, that feels terrible. It should feel terrible, but that doesn't mean that it's a permanent state, that, forgiveness is as important, if not more important, than judgment. And our sort of traditional view of all this is to try to balance out, again, what God seems to do, only God seems to be able to do, which is to balance din and rachamim, compassion on one hand and justice on the other. We as human beings, we don't exactly make it through in that kind of way. The last major prayer that we'll get to, it's towards the end of our service, which is Shema Kolenu, which is usually chanted by the cantor, especially on the high holidays. Very big piece. And its main essence is it says Shema Kolenu. Shema, obviously we know, means hear, right? We're asking God to hear. Kolenu is our voices, right? To hear basically the voice of our prayer. And eventually we get to a section which we say, Al tashlichenu milfanecha. Don't tashlich, don't send us away, right? The service that we do on Rosh Hashanah after we're done, where we go to the beach and we throw stuff, right? That's tashlich. It means basically to cast away. So we're asking God again, right? Not just a question of mercy, right? Don't send us away. And it is itself a beautiful piece of medieval poetry, and has become really again a very significant part of the service as a whole. And what I sort of thought about over the years, right, is that this prayer captures, I think, a very human response to when we fail, which is the fear that we are going to, have irreparably damaged the world in which we live and the relationships we have with people, and we're going to be cast away, right? And that fear is a very real fear. So the Slichot service also helps us to sort of play out that fear in real time, express it, and remind ourselves that God's nature is that God is essentially waiting for us to make the first move. Okay, God is forgiving, but God is not going to just forgive as a blanket, right? God is going to forgive when one with humility and with self, I think, consideration and to some degree, again, soul searching, right? When a person comes to God asking for genuine forgiveness, to remind ourselves of that, but that we have to be also, clear about the fact that we are concerned. It is, not always a given in our lives that we are forgiven. And then actually, I think in some ways our tradition tells us that God forgives us easier than human beings do. Human beings have a tendency to hold on to things, right? And that teaching, as I shared with you, is one that says, while God, in traditional belief, right, God knows all, sees all, exists throughout all time and space. Nothing is a surprise. But to us, that's not how we live our lives, right? We live our lives moment to moment, day to day, year to year, and we oftentimes carry with ourselves a tremendous amount of guilt and shame and feelings of not deserving even forgiveness. So the service of Slichot, as I said, is on the one hand, it's pro forma, right? It's something that we do and we do every year, and we tend not to think much about it, but the reality is it's more than pro forma. It is essential to us being able to enter this particular part of the year with seriousness. And I think, this year especially, I would say, you can't come into this high holiday season without, taking it serious, taking the world in which we live as serious. And, I hope in some way that this service will be that for all of us, in one form or the other, for me and Mimi here, and for those that are watching at home. So before we begin what's in the booklet here, which I have to always give credit, was created for us years ago by then cantor Amanda Kleinman, student cantor Amanda Kleinman, who is now senior cantor Amanda Mendelson at Westchester Reformed Temple, and her and Rabbi Morris worked together on sort of pulling this service together. But on that little page handout, the loose page, there is one on the front that I wanted to teach. This is a newer piece, and as I said, there is a refrain to it. The refrain goes like this. Chatanu lefanecha rachem aleinu. And I'll do it again. Chatanu lefanecha rachem aleinu. So those are the places where, if you know that melody, you can sing with me even at home. We'll hear you here. And you can even hear, and you'll notice it more as I sing, that this is a piyut that comes really from Edot HaMizrach, from the Mizrahi Jews, from Jews that are predominantly living again in the Middle East, some degree in parts of North Africa. And the Edot HaMizrach, the melody itself is not going to sound European, it's going to sound Middle Eastern. And that is often the case for some of the most famous piyutim as they take on that sort of quality. So, Mimi, it's going to be a lot of me singing, in Hebrew, but you can see in the English, again, all the sort of examples. And this, as I said, is an acrostic. So if you're listening carefully, you're going to hear an aleph, a bet, a gimel, a dalet, and so on as it goes through. Okay? So it goes like this. Adon atzelichot bochen levavot gole amukot dover tzedakot Chatanu lefanecha, Rachem aleinu. Chatanu lefanecha, Rachem aleinu. Hadur ben hiflaot, Vatik ben hechamot, Zocher berhitavot, Choker kelayot, Chatanu lefanecha, Rachem aleinu. Chatanu lefanecha, Rachem aleinu. Tovu meitiv labriot, Yodea kol nistarot, Kovesh avonot, Lovesh tzedakot. Chatanu lefanecha, Rachem aleinu. Chatanu lefanecha, Rachem aleinu. Male zakiyut, Nora tehilot, Soleach avonot, One be'etzarot. Chatanu lefanecha, Rachem aleinu. Chatanu lefanecha, Rachem aleinu. Poel Yeshuot, Tzofe Atidot, Kore Hadorot, Rochev Aravot. Chatanu lefanecha, Rachem aleinu. Chatanu lefanecha, Rachem aleinu. Shomea tefilot, temim deot. Shomea tefilot, temim deot. Chatanu lefanecha, Rachem aleinu. So you can hear again, like a lot of the things that I was describing, there is a sort of repetitiveness to it. It's not overly complex musically. It's meant to involve the community. It's not just sort of performative like a lot of the high holidays end up becoming. So, you know, it to me, is really quite beautiful. So we'll turn now to page 1 of our booklet. So maybe that's the first page once we open it. And we begin with, trying to remember which psalm. It's the 121st psalm, I believe, very famous, Esainai. And again, you can sort of catch on to the theme as it plays out through the service, right? Esainai el harim me'ayin yavo Ezri. When I lift up my eyes to the mountains, from where will my help come? Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. My help comes from God, maker of heaven and earth. Okay, so again, keeping that idea of, you know, we're reaching out to God and we're hoping for a response. So the melody goes like this. Esainai el harim me'ayin yavo Ezri. Esainai el harim me'ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. And we're now on the bottom of page 1. And we go back and forth. This again, Ashrei, the 145th Psalm. We're just going to do the opening and closing. It goes like this. Ashrei Yoshvei Vehitecha Od Yehalelucha Od Yehalelucha shekachalo. Ashreham Shadonai Elohav. Ashreham Shadonai Elohav. Tehilat Adonai Yedaber Pi. Vayevarech Kol Basar. Shem Kodsho Leolam Vahed. Vanachnu Nevarechia. Mehata V'ad Olam. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. We turn to the Chatzi Kaddish now on page 2, which has a special melody for this service and for the high holidays, which I'll do my best to do. Yitkadal Ve'itkadash Shemei Rahaba Be'al Mahadivra Chirutei Ve'hamlich Malchutei Bechayechon uvyomechon Uvechaye dechol Beit Yisrael Ba'galha Uvizman Kariv Ve'imeru Amen. Yesh Rabba Mevarach Le'alam U'le'alme Al-Mahayah Yitbarach Yitbarach Ve'yishtabach Ve'yitpa'ar Ve'yitromam Ve'yitnaseh Ve'yitadar Ve'yitaleh Ve'yitalal Shemei Dekudesha Berichu Leila U'leila Mikol Mirchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechemata Damirhan Be'alma Ve'imeru Amen. So you can already hear, right, as the holidays come in, everything musically changes, gets much heavier sounding for sure. So as we turn to page 3, we'll have the first of our introductory readings to the Adonai Adonai, of which we're going to repeat again over the service 3 times. Traditionally, it's done 3 times in a row each time. I've learned over the years there's only so much repetition we can do. And you may recall from my teaching just a few moments ago, the preamble section, El Melech Yoshev Al Kisei Rachamim, gives us a sort of introductory piyut that leads us into this recitation. So we'll begin by reading in English at the top of the page. And maybe if you want, you can join with me, but if not, it's okay. On page 3 again at the top. God of forgiveness, we come before you in need of compassion. At Sinai, you spoke words that guide our lives to this day. But our ancestors lost faith in you, lost hope in their Redeemer. With one voice, they had promised, we will do and obey, and yet, stiff-necked, they broke their word, adoring an idol of gold. How wondrous your compassion in the face of their rebellion, how your forgiveness in that moment of human weakness and doubt. We too have broken promises to you. We too worship the work of our own hands. We too make of gold a god, and we too forsake your word. At Sinai, you revealed 13 attributes of mercy. These aspects of your nature your very essence, we now recall. El melech yoshev al kisei rachamim, mitnaheg b'chasidut, mochel abonot amo, mavir rishon rishon, marbe mechila l'chataim, uslicha l'foshaim, ose tzedakot im kol basar veruach, lo charatam tigmol. El horeta lanu lamar shalosh esrei, zechor lanu hayom berit shlosh esrei, kemo sheodata lanu mikedem, kemo shekatuv, vayered Adonai be'anan, vayityatzeh imo sham, vayikra b'shem Adonai, vayavor Adonai al panav, vayikra Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim B'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed Lahalafim, Nosei Avon V'Fesha, V'Chata V'Nakeh, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim B'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed Lahalafim, Nosei Avon V'Fesha, V'Chata V'Nakeh, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed Lahalafim, Nosei Avon V'Fesha, V'Chata V'Nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, God compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving and true, showing mercy to the 1,000th generation, forgiving evil, defiance, and wrongdoing, granting pardon. Now on page 4. In all your ways be aware of God, for there is no sovereign without a people. Ein melech below am. We are the chariot on which God's glory rides, for there is no sovereign without a people. Let the love of God be spread through our deeds, for there is no sovereign without a people. Where is God? Enter where we let God in, for there is no sovereign without a people. Ein melech below am. Eternal God, you revealed to Moses your 13 attributes of mercy. They exist in the world through our awareness. They transform the world through our actions. We speak them now as prayer and aspiration. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed Lahalafim, Nosei Avon V'Fesha, V'Chata V'Nakeh. I'll just note also, they do a very nice job at the bottom of page 4 of showing you all the different places they are pulling from in creating this little reading that introduces those. So you have everything, again, ranging from the Talmud to Rabbeinu Bachya, which is not until the 13th century, ultimately, Isaiah, and also all the way from the Kotzker Rebbe, which is not until much later. So, again, and especially us in our congregation here, we need to have a degree of pride, because this is taken from our Machzor, the one that we use and that Reformed communities all over the world use, and that is only really because of both the work of our Rabbi Emeritus, Rabbi Morris, as one of its editors, and also the generosity of the Gruss-Lipper family, who are the ones who gave the initial money to allow for it to be created and printed in the first place. So it really is, again, our little temple here on the far end of the world has an outsized responsibility for the Machzor that the Reform movement uses to this day. So we'll turn now to page 5. Lu echsev fanav belivi vaita. If I could see God's face within my heart, I'd see the face of a gardener, compassionate to weed and flower alike, patiently pruning, graciously planting, loving the endless hours of tending and nurturing the earth, seeds, roots, all that grows, and true to the essence of the gardener's work, forgiving the fallen branches, the withered petals, the cracked stones, the broken stems. Lu echseh fanav belivi vaita. If I could see God's face within my heart, I'd see the human face in 1,000 acts of mercy. The one who gives bread to the hungry and shelters the lost, who hears the voice of grief and makes room for the stranger, who brings relief to the blind, the bent, the unjustly imprisoned, and is true to the essence of holy work, defying evil, healing brokenness, easing pain, and in the end, forgiving ourselves as God forgives us. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum Vechanun, Erech Apayim Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed Lahalafim, Nosei Avon V'Afesha, V'Chata V'Nakem. We'll turn now to page 6, which is one of the prayers that I referenced, Shema Kolenu, and then Al Tashlichenu towards the bottom of the page. So there's one melody for the top and another melody for the bottom. The melody for the bottom, unfortunately I can't recreate it in this space, but it was a melody created by a woman named Basia Schachter, who I think is still the music director at Congregation Romamu, which is in the city. At the time, she was involved in my synagogue at B'nai Jeshurun, and she created this amazing piece of music, and it was done with a pianist and I think a cellist and music to it. So it's not quite as impactful without that music, but it's still one of my favorite pieces of music of the high holiday season. And we don't actually, I think, maybe we do it here if the cantor gets a little tired at the end of Yom Kippur, but otherwise it's not usually part of our regular liturgy. So or our regular melodies, I should say. So it's fun for me to be able to do it here. So here it goes. Shema Koleinu Adonai Eloheinu Chus Merachem Aleinu V'takabel Merachamim Uveratzon et tefilatenu Hashimenu Adonai Elecha V'nashuva Chadesh Chadesh Yaminu Kekedem. Towards the bottom of the page. Ai lai 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 lai. Ai lai 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 lai. Ai lai ai lai 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 ai lai lai. Ai lai 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 ai lai ai lai lai. Al tashlichenu milfanecha ai veruach kochecha al tikach mimenu ein al tashlichenu leitzikna ein kichlot kochenu al tazvenu ein al tazvenu Adonai Eloheinu ein al tirchak mimenu. So we'll turn now to page 7, and this will be the first vidui, the first confessional of the high holiday season for us. So this again will become familiar to us when we get to Yom Kippur, But this reminding us again when we get to at the bottom of the page, Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, even if you don't know Hebrew, when you see nun and an u at the end, nu at the end, it is the way in which Hebrew grammar attaches we to a verb. Right? So in this case, Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu means that it's not just me, and it's not just Mimi, and it's not just the person sitting next to you. It's all of us. Every one of us is responsible for, if not all of these things, right? Maybe not quite so literally, and I hope, Mimi, you're not going out and stealing things. I like to think I'm not doing that either. But then again, every time that, I share my Netflix password with somebody, I think to myself, well, maybe in some ways I'm doing these kinds of things. The acknowledgement is that, again, this is both an individual exercise and a communal exercise. And while it is not designed for us to sort of amalgamate, right, each of our failings, our sins, our places where we didn't achieve what we had hoped for the year, is ours to bear. But it's important to remind ourselves that nobody, okay, especially not the rabbi, but nobody in the room on Yom Kippur can sit there and feel that they have not done anything. Even the children in the room have things that, if they look back on the last year, can realize there are things to fix, things to do. And while, again, we may not be responsible for each of these things, I once had a professor who got angry with me that I suggested as much, and I pushed back on her, and I said, to me, if you look at this list and you can say that you are nowhere to be found anywhere in it, then you're not being honest with yourself. She wasn't so thrilled with that response, but I felt I had to defend myself in that moment also, and I stick to it. I believe that. So here we'll read as an introduction at the top Tavo. Normally this is chanted by the cantor. It's a big piece. But it says, Our God and God of all generations, may our prayers reach your presence, and when we turn to you, do not be indifferent. Eternal One, our God and God of our ancestors, we do not say to you in arrogance and stubbornness, we are blameless and do no wrong. In truth, we and our forebears have stumbled, and we have fallen. So, Mimi, if it's comfortable for you, this part we usually rise for, and the tradition, again, is not beating ourselves up in this way, but the way I explain it to our students in the Hebrew school and at the family services, it's more knocking on the door, right? It's trying to wake us up a little bit. So with each word, we add a little bit of an oomph, okay? So it goes like this. Ashamnu Baganu Gazalnu Dibarnu Dofi Hevinu Vehirshanu Zadnu Chamasnu Tafanu Shaker Yatsnura Kizavnu Latsnu Maradnu Niatsnu Sararnu Havinu Pashanu Tsaranu Kishinu Oref Rashanu Shichatnu Tiavnu Ta'inu Titanu. Okay, as we are reaching almost the end of our service, we have again another very famous of the piyutim of the Slichot variety on page 8. Similar kind of idea here again, where there is a consistent melody and a refrain that people can involve themselves. In this case, the words in Hebrew, Hu Ya'anenu. So the first words, Mi She'ana. Mi She'ana is basically, right, when a person in the stories of the Tanakh reaches out to God, God Ya'anenu, God answers. Anen means to answer. Okay, so Mi She'ana l'Sarah Imenu, who answered Sarah, our mother, when she was in her barrenness. Okay, Hu Ya'anenu, God responded. Mi She'ana la'Avraham Avinu Bahar HaMoriah, right, who answered Abraham our father when he was standing on Mount Moriah to sacrifice his son. Hu Ya'anenu, right? God answers, and so on. And it goes through, right? Yitzchak, Rivka, Yaakov, Leah, Rachel, Yosef. One of the first things that should stand out to you is that in this list, right, it's not just the patriarchs, it's the matriarchs as well, and it's not just the patriarchs and the matriarchs. It goes all the way through. Yosef, even in this case, Lamyaldot HaIvriot, it isn't even technically Jewish people. It is the Egyptian maidservants. I mean, what's the word I'm looking for? That help people with birth. Midwives, right? The midwives, right? That ultimately come to help. And in this case, Ivriot, is the Jewish, midwives. Yocheved also, and you have right. All of these things, right, all the way through. And the main idea is the same refrain, right? That in the moments of where a person feels despondent, they feel abandoned, they feel fear, they feel that there is no God, right? Who is the one that answers their prayers? It's God. God comes through each and every time. So I'm going to sing, and the refrain, and for those at home, you can sing it, right? It goes like this. Hu Ya'anenu, Hu Ya'anenu. And that's really your only responsible part. Everything else I will do. It goes like this. Mishe'ana l'saraimeinu beziknata Hu Ya'anenu Mishe'ana l'Avraham Avinu behar HaMoria Hu Ya'anenu Mishe'ana l'Yitzchak ben Amshenekad al gabei HaMizbeach Hu Ya'anenu Mishe'ana l'Rivka be'Heriona Hu Ya'anenu Mishe'ana l'Yaakov be'Beitel Hu Ya'anenu Mishe'ana l'Leah ba'Anya Hu Ya'anenu Mishe'ana l'Rachel be'itzvona Hu Ya'anenu Mishe'ana le'Yosef be'Vet HaSurim Hu Ya'anenu Mishe'ana Lamyaldot HaIvriot al ha'avnayim Hu Ya'anenu Mishe'ana le'Yocheved al Sfat HaYoar Hu Ya'anenu Mishe'ana Lavotenu u'le'imotenu al Yam Suf Hu Ya'anenu Mishe'ana le'Moshe Bechorev Hu Ya'anenu Mishe'ana le'Miriam Biv'ara Hu Ya'anenu Mishe'ana le'Aharon Be'machta Hu Ya'anenu Mishe'ana Livnot Slichot be'Hamadan Petach Ohel Moed Hu Ya'anenu Mishe'ana le'Eliyahu be'Kol Demamad Akaba Midbar Hu Ya'anenu. I misspoke at the beginning. It's Sarah in her old age. It is in her barrenness also, but her barrenness experienced in old age. Right, the story that we read on Yom Kippur about casting out Hagar and the birth of Isaac. So, again, this is one of those times where if you know each of these stories, which, traditionally speaking, one might be expected to know, some of these are deeper cuts. These are things that are lesser known, but most things are known. You have a question, maybe? Yeah. Tzlofchad. So this is a great example. So the Benot Tzlofchad are the daughters of a guy named Tzlofchad, who in the Torah are one of the few examples in which women are given names, women are given a voice, and they challenge Moshe about a particular issue related to inheritance, because basically what happens is, right, Tzlofchad dies, if I remember correctly, right, he dies, there are only daughters, So all of his inheritance is then going to go to his brother, according to the tradition. So there is a success of the Bnot Zelophehad initially. Moshe walks it back a little bit a couple weeks later. It's still not exactly what I would describe as progressive in that sense, but it is one of the examples in the Torah in which, right, there is a beseeching of a group of people, in this case these daughters, who call out to God for justice, and God in the end is the one that responds. And if you go to the last page, it will actually give you in English, as it says, all the different pieces, as it were. So our last piece of this service, which is customarily done, we used to do it, and now I realize I should go back to doing it. It is done in the month of Elul, and it asks a question. It begins, Achad sha'alti me'et Adonai, ota avakesh, shivti bevet Adonai kol yemei chayai, lach sarot benoam Adonai ulevaker behechalo. One thing I ask of God, and for this I yearn, to dwell in the house of God all the days of my life, to behold God's beauty, and to pray in God's sanctuary. And in this case, right, this may be what the person who wrote Achad Sha'alti was thinking, but I always like to sort of throw it back to us, right? If you could ask one thing of God this high holiday season, what would that be? And I don't want you to answer that, but think about it, right? Ask what that one sort of question is. Achad sha'alti meit Adonai ota avakesh. Achad sha'alti meit Adonai ota avakesh. Shivti bebeit Adonai kol yemei chayai. Lachazot benoam Adonai ulevaker behechalo. Lachazot benoam Adonai ulevaker behechalo. And that is our service of Slichot for this year. But Mimi, if you'll indulge me, I think since it is now sundown and it is Saturday night, I thought we could do Havdalah as our sort of ending piece here. And again, Mimi and I in the room, we have no idea who's watching or if any of you are still watching, but I like to think that there are people still watching. But if not, it was a lovely chance to get to spend some time with you.
Where do I find?
Good point. So let me, in our regular prayer book, the Mishkan Tefillah, it's on page 610. 610, and then let me get everything over here. That's what I'll do. Okay, I'm using actually I've never seen a Havdalah candle quite like this before, but it was given to the congregation by our visitors from the IMPJ a few weeks ago when we had Rabbi Kariv, who was here as a guest speaker, the member of Knesset, and he has connection to the Reform movement in Israel, known as the IMPJ, the Israel Movement for Progressive and Reform Judaism in Israel. And so they've created these candles. My understanding is that the money from the sale of these candles goes to one of the communities that is on the border with Gaza in Israel. I have to get the full story of exactly what it is, but it's a lovely image and a lovely idea. And even though I was really concerned that this was like paper that was going to light on fire, it's on the actual candle itself, which is fascinating in its own right. So let me get this lit here and get this ready. And then we'll get started. Okay, so we're on page 610 to begin. Hine el Yeshuati evtach melov chad ki hazi v'zimrat yadonai v'hili le'Yeshua u'shaftem mahayim esason mimaynei ha'Yeshua la'Adonai Yeshua lamcha v'irchatecha sela Adonai tzvot imanu miskav lanu el Yaakov sela Adonai tzvot ashrei adam botech bach Adonai Hoshia hamelech yaninu v'yom korinu La'Yehudim haita ora v'simcha v'sason v'ikar Ken tieh lanu kos Yeshua asa u'shem Adonai ekram Ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen borei peri hagafen Ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei besamim borei minei besamim Ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei milrei haesh borei milrei haesh Ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lechol ben or lechoshech ben Yisrael le'amim ben yom hashvi'i le'sheshet yemei ha'maseh Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh lechol Ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la Hamavdil ben kodesh lechol chatoteinu mimchol Zareinu bechaspeinu yarbea bekachol v'chakochavim balayla Zareinu bechaspeinu yarbea bekachol v'chakochavim balayla Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov A good week, a week of peace May gladness reign and joy increase. A good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi, Bimera veyamenu, Yavo Eleinu. Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David. Shavua Tov and Lashana Tova. Metuka b'shalom. May it be a sweet and peaceful new year for all of us. And Mimi, thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you to our friends that we hope again are still watching at home. And I hope we, if nothing else, we learned a little bit tonight. And oh, good, good. Look, that makes me feel very happy because the truth is, when I was a kid.
Tutoring.
Yeah, me too.
Had it twice in my life.
Well,
First time was algebra. No, geometry.
I don't know which is more complicated, but in my case, that's it. So again, wish our friends at home a good night, and we'll get Mimi and Bart home safely, and we'll see everybody soon. And Mitzvah Day tomorrow, don't forget. Mitzvah Day.
Tomorrow you have a busy day.
Uh,
Skipping that one.
Yes, I understand. And,